Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your hosts. Hey everyone, Erick here with Leadership is Tricky. Steven, hey, what's going on?
Nothing much, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So we have a return guest today. So we have Patti Tutalo. How you doing, Patti? Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, no, I'm glad to have you back on. I know we have a lot to talk about today, but I think the last time we spoke was pre-pandemic. So walk us kind of through how you guys, whether you sheltered down or how you spent the pandemic.
I know, toilet paper.
Right. Yeah. So how was it with you and the family throughout that time?
Yeah, I won't lie. It was a struggle, but I was just thinking we are in some sort of normalcy, I feel like, again, and reflecting back on it, it was tough. It was very tough. So my kids are now just about 13 and 9. So they're still in elementary school whenever they were going through this. And my son just went into middle school this year, but it was hard. They were in virtual school for exactly a year, and which forced me, I wouldn't say forced me, but it made me pause what I was doing career-wise and really just hunker down with them and be with them and help them with all their studies. I felt like the school was, struggling a bit, trying to figure out the virtual thing. And then they didn't have sports or activities, which was also very tough to try to navigate what is safe, what isn't safe, outdoor activities. But I will say that we had a lot of flexibility because I wasn't on active duty anymore and my husband was working from home. We were able to escape to North Carolina for about 3 months and just quarantined or whatever you want to call it down there. So that was a really fun thing, because when in life do you have everything paused to where you can just leave for a couple months? So that was good. But at the same time, I paused my business and I paused my career and paused where I was going. And looking back, it was good because I think I needed that. I needed that time for self-reflection and to determine what I really wanted. So when I originally made my business, which is, I guess I can explain a little bit what that is. It's a consultancy where I help organizations become more inclusive of women. And I do that through more traditional consulting. But what I mean by that is I guide companies through a process that they do the work to become more inclusive. Right. I'm really big on, like, if you want to become, a bodybuilder, you can't contract that out to somebody. You have to actually do the work yourself. You need to get your butt to the gym. You need to do the workouts and you need to do the work. So my motto is really... I know, right?
There are other ways, Erick.
Until somebody figures out how to contract that out, they're going to be a millionaire.
Man, my Google search has been coming up empty. Not cool.
Yeah. So that's how I try to, walk them through so that they can, I always say, and Erick, you remember our professor, Dr. Livingston at Harvard, he would say it needs to be baked in the bread and not just the icing on top. And that's kind of been the model for me moving forward, is like with my businesses, how do I get it, truly baked into the organization? And that's by them doing the work. And then I also do coaching as well as women's circles to help support women come together and support each other and become more authentic in their leadership style. So, but that model of how to have my consultancy came out of my own self-reflection. I also did a course where I was a business coach and a life coach to help me work through like what I truly want and my gifts and how to apply those to a business. And it's been really remarkable because the business went from what do I think companies want me to be to what can I offer in my heart of hearts to companies.
Right.
So it's been a really good process. Who knew when I retired in 2019 that there would be this pandemic and everything, the world would go in a totally different direction. But I think in the end, we handled it well as a family, and, you know, professionally, I feel like I'm in a really good spot, and overall, you know, in a good place.
Yeah, Patti, I have a question for you. Kind of leading, but if you're open to being vulnerable. So you said COVID kind of forced this self-reflection moment for you. And maybe that's just what I heard. Do you think you would have taken the time to self-reflect, shut the business down, reconsider just the whole strategy if it wasn't for the pandemic?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know, but I will say that I don't think my company would be successful or that I would be happy had I been continuing on that same trajectory. It felt very scattered and very it felt a little more inauthentic. And now it feels, it's exciting. It's at my core, you know, it's,
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that it's, whether it's a consultancy or even if I'm not completely opposed to working for a company, as long as it's doing what my heart of hearts wants to do, if that makes sense. And that's the piece that was different, is like really understanding what I want to do and having the confidence to say, I'm only going to do those things. If you want me to do something else, then go somewhere else. We're good. You know,
So we talk about it all the time. It's purpose, right?
Yes.
And, you know, I think we can all attest to, while the pandemic, and I'm very sympathetic to those that lost folks and had to suffer through the negative aspects of the pandemic. You know, I tell folks all the time that it was great for I know my family to be able to just reset, right? Do that reflection and then understand truly what is your purpose, like, because with everything that was happening, right, and not knowing, you know, what your mortality was going to look like, you know, you take a step back and you say, you know, why am I here? What is it I want to do? Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, but it's, you know, you start to look at your values and your beliefs, and you look at what your true purpose is here for the time that we're on this planet. And
I'll add something else to that. So like,
go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
The way that life was, if we can remember those days, it flipped a bunch of systems and models on their heads, and things that we took for granted that just weren't necessarily sustainable going forward, given the data and the information that we had when the pandemic hit. You know, we had to social distance. That was a new term to everybody. We had no idea what that was. Wearing a mask was kind of a completely new thing for at least a lot of the Western world. I know some of the world was dealt with other pandemics previous to that didn't really spread the globe. But for me, I think from a leadership lens, like it's incredibly important to just like, number one, I applaud you for taking the time, Patti, like just to being able to say, this is not where I need to be. Let's take some time. If it meant like lost revenue, lost customers, lost clients, whatever the pause was to you, you still did it and just kind of reset with your own folks and your own people. And you said, let's get back to what is really going to drive us on the right trajectory. And I don't think a lot of people do that. And you know, hopefully our listeners out there will understand that it shouldn't take a pandemic to do it. So I'm not saying that that's, you know, something that should have happened to you or shouldn't have happened to you, but you know, there's always blessings in these opportunities that present themselves to us. And you know, good on you for seeing it in the moment and, you know, actually doing it, you know, because I think that's the hardest part of all.
I had a question for you too, Patti. You said North Carolina. Were you guys in the Outer Banks? Because I saw your guys' pictures and videos, and I was extremely jealous.
Oh, no, we were in Oak Island, which is just south of the Outer Banks, and it's about an hour and 15 minutes from Myrtle Beach north. Yeah.
Oh, so there was golf too. Okay. Which was a great, safe activity that we all learned about.
Yes, we actually went golfing a few times as a family, which was hysterical because my son was golfing for the first time. Now, granted, he's a bit of an athlete, but and all of us are, but we're not really golfers. So you put a bunch of like basketball or lacrosse players, on a golf course. It was a hot mess. My daughter didn't want to, she wasn't really interested in golfing. So she's drawing pictures of us as we're golfing. And I was like, this is what pandemic golfing looks like. Like it's just a mess, but it got us out there. Yeah. Cool. It was nice.
Yeah. So just pulling the string a little bit on, you mentioned that you reset your business and, you wanted to focus on your purpose. So what was your business's name? And then what is it now? Because I know you kind of transitioned that as well.
So the old business it still exists, I guess, but A Whole Authentic You. And it was more focused on helping just women become more supportive of each other, help them gain confidence and authenticity and leadership and things like that, which I haven't abandoned that mission. And that's definitely part of my purpose. But the piece that changed was this part about taking organizations to the gym to do their workouts. That's the piece that's kind of changed. Whenever I would, for example, designing a workshop for an organization that says, I want to better support my women. I want there to be better communication or something like that with women. The tendency is for the focus to be solely on the women and supporting them, right? Like getting a group together, the circles, things like that, maybe executive coaching. But what I guess the shift is now, that's not going to solve anything. That's just a little bit of a Band-Aid. How we actually get the problem is by getting the entire organization involved. So we start with the command, and then we can get whatever it is, department heads or those silos, get those people involved and get the communication flowing and set up the system so that there's a method to get the issues up to the chain of command, so to speak, and have some solutions to solve them. Like, we can't just sit here and say, put the pressure on women, give us the answers to the problem. Women, what are the problems? Women, it's got to be more holistic, and it's got to be command driven, in my opinion. So yeah, if that makes sense. So the new company is called Patti Tutalo Consulting, and that's that more holistic model.
So I'm curious. So I think the problem that you laid out there is very common with anything. If it's, women's equality and empowering, subsets of an organization, I think we hear this all the time, hacking that bureaucracy of great idea somewhere in the organization, wherever it happens to be, gets lost in that chain of command, to use kind of that proverbial, notion. And then if it ever does get to said leader that can actually make a decision on said action or idea, by the time it maybe gets to them or maybe doesn't, it's maybe too late. It's changed the flavor of the intent and all of that stuff. So could you mind describing like just one way that we could hack that kind of, I always call it hack the bureaucracy, or just being more of that rebel talent and creating the drive to make things happen?
It's a great question. And it's, I think, where most companies get stuck is they say, I'm ready. I get the business case.
We're ready. Out of shape. We want to go to the gym, right?
Yeah, we're right on that edge. Like, it's January 1st. Let's do this,
Oh, there's that donut. Wow.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. One, there's sneaky things you can do. And what I mean by sneaky is,
I like that word, by the way. That's good. I'm all in on this.
Yes, you could call it sneaky, or you could call it just strategic, but
creative.
Yeah. Right. So So things like that, or you're just changing processes to get rid of the bias.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is, for example, you implement a policy that says we're going to get rid of names on applications for the hire process. And that's, people might not understand, you'll get some pushback, I think, potentially, but I think that that's a way to sort of sneak in a different way of doing business that'll eliminate bias from showing up. Another thing, and names are a big one. You could do that for promotions, for the military boards and panels, things like that. So that's one method. But as far as, and there's a lot of different ideas out there. One of our professors, Iris Bonet, she's like one of my heroes because she wrote a whole book on this about how to change the system to mitigate the bias. So just rather than sitting here trying to change everybody's brains, which is nearly impossible, unless you really work at it every day for hours, you're not going to change their bias. So instead, make the system better so that you eliminate those opportunities for the bias to pop up. So that's one method that's really, really effective. But the other piece, which I think is more complicated, is getting the people on board with the change. And one of the things we learned was there's three buckets of people. There's people that are on board with the change. The middle people are on the fence. And I always use the example, whenever I was working for the Navy, I had a Navy chief. And meanwhile, I was only an O2. So I was maybe 25 years old or so. I don't know how old I was, very young Coast Guard officer. And they sent me a Navy chief who had only been on subs his entire career. And I'm like, oh God, how's this going to work? This guy has never worked with a woman before in his life. Like, what is this going to look like? And he, I think, falls into that category. Like, he never had to think about the issue. So he doesn't, but he can be influenced. And he was fabulous, actually. So he ended up being one of these, proponents of like the change. And, so those are the middle bucket, the people that are on the fence that want to do the right thing, but they don't necessarily know much about the topic. And then you have the bottom third that are like, no way, women don't even belong in this workplace or whatever, So the motto is don't worry about those guys. You're never going to convince those guys. So let's work with this population. And that's really where I think the rubber meets the road is for organizations, you have to utilize these very pro people and have them influence and bring these people up to speed. So it's a lot of like a little bit of peer pressure, but it's also, I sometimes say you slap people from all different sides. So whether you have an affinity group or an employee resource group that's influencing, you have, for some people, it's new legislation came down. So what do you do to implement that? That's another kind of slap on an organization. Like, you need to do this, or a policy. And then you look at just, some of the leaders, invite them to the meetings whenever that are very pro change, So there's a lot of different ways, but that's more of the creative strategy of getting things through the bureaucracy. That's the most, and that's where I love to actually play, is learn all the players, who's on which team, and then let's figure out how to use everybody effectively.
Yeah, like my big takeaway from what you just mentioned was, I think a lot of people focus on the folks that they can't convince. And for whatever reason, that's just what they do, because as a leader, a lot of your team's situations and problems, challenges, opportunities, couch it however you want. You always focus on the 90% of your issues, which come from the 10% of your folks. It's that rule that I can't remember who actually coined the term, but it's easy for us to focus on fixing things versus let's just empower, enable, and release the chains, so to speak, on the folks that actually potentially are going to be behind us, and then the folks that are your champions, those early adopters and evangelists, and let them go off and actually do all the work, because those are the ones that we really need to go all in on. And I'm reminded of, there's a TED Talk which is based on this like YouTube video called How to Start a Movement. This guy dancing all crazy at I think Red Rocks in Colorado at a concert, and he looks like a moron out there by himself until there's maybe 2 or 3 folks. And then there's this thing called a tipping point that occurs, and I think that to me is like the most impactful thing, because humans by nature, I think, want to be involved in a part of like a community and a thing that's happening. And you can see it in social media, you can see it in all kinds of things. And once they see momentum there, they'll flock to it, because it's hard to be that first follower. We've always talked about that. Like, that's the most important person at all. So I think that's great. And hopefully you're giving organizations like that will to actually motivate and inspire those first followers out there. It's great.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I just wanted to put out there. So I know Iris Bonet, she's amazing. So her book is What Works, and she talks about all those actionable things that you can do. So, how do you redesign the system so that way it helps those that are disenfranchised, and or enables the organizations to do what they need to do to change. And then just Stephen, just to throw it out there for folks that are looking for that video, it's all about the lone nut and the first follower. So yeah, it's a great video. And, we see it today, because you had mentioned social media. We see it today with influencers on Instagram. They'll push any product. And if you are a resistor, you're not going to be interested, but it's really about those fence sitters. I know I always equate it back to, with Apple devices. You're always going to have those folks. You can even say like a Dungeons and Dragons movie, right? They're camped out for days and days, right, to get the first iPhone, and the folks that love, like a Samsung Android device just aren't going to be interested in anything that anyone that loves Apple has to say. But, Apple, they know they have the early adopters, and those fence sitters are the people that are passing by Apple wishing they were in that line, right? Or, they just recoin the widget to just be a better mousetrap and say, hey, we're going to add another camera lens to this phone to get you back. And they know they've gotten you because you are.
Charge you $500 more.
It was crazy. My daughter wanted a phone the other day. I know I'm going down a different path now, but she's 7 and she wants to do like sleepovers and things like that. And I was like, okay, only if you have a phone. So we started looking. It's like $1,200 for a phone. I'm like, what? That's a used car.
Yeah,
insane. Well, not anymore. Even used cars, they're in the 20,000 range.
Oh, it's terrible. No, it's great. But yeah, so I just wanted to share though, because we were talking about like how do we strip out the names and the gender bias out of like the recruitment process. So I was in an organization out in Belgium, and when I first got there, we did a command climate survey. For those that aren't in the military, it's really just taking inventory of the issues within your organization and getting the temperature of the organization. And then you start to bend things in different categories. So like leadership, trust, and cohesion, gender equality, the hiring process. But you take all of those issues that they were surveyed on, and you start to develop an action plan. And one of them was gender bias in the hiring process. So what we did was we got our HR organization that was across the street on board to strip out the names, right? And then, we put it out there with an announcement that was more appealing to not just males, right? And what we found was, especially in IT, because that's the field that, Stephen and I are in, but we weren't finding that a lot of women were applying, one, and then two, the ones that did make the list, even if we offered them the job, they had to really make a hard assessment on whether or not they wanted to move their family, across, to Europe. And, they're making those hard decisions. But what I found was cool, because we did some, we got some feedback from the folks that did apply, what was appealing about the job. And it was the way that we put the announcement out there. It felt more inclusive. And then we offered interviews to more women at the end of the day than we have in the past. So we're giving them the option, the opportunity. And I think that's what's missing sometimes, is just the opportunity, and then playing to the appeal of what might interest the broader community than just, a small segment of people. But those are some things that we did. I mean, after I left the organization, I don't know that they kept up that practice, but I still see it today. There's a lot of bias built into the processes that we have within the organizations, and it's not just gender bias, but it's multiple biases and prejudices that are built in, to the system still. But no, I just wanted to talk about that because, I got that from Iris Bonet's book. I got that from the feedback from Command Climate Survey on, these are some actionable things that you can do. And, back to your point was, instead of grabbing a focus group of just women, it was a diverse focus group to say, what are some things we can do in the short term? Because we have to bring, men to the table to have that conversation so that we can see exactly, where our bias and prejudice lies, right? And it's within us in some cases. It might not be deliberate, right, and on purpose, but it's there. And we have to be aware to start that conversation and not just give the work to the women, right? I think it's on women to give the work back to us, males, right, in society, to solve. And, I'm just more interested in your work because, I've got two little girls upstairs right now that need women like you, right, to help pave the way for them. But go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Patty, I've got one comment on all this. So we need all those voices, and you're absolutely right. One thing that's coming to my mind right now is psychological safety in an organization. And what I mean by that is not only the subset of individuals, in your case, maybe females, that might not feel safe to even have a conversation with others in the organization, but the other side as well. The detractors, the folks that might not even understand that there's an issue, at play. What are your ideas or opportunities around just increasing at least the psychological safety before you bring everybody together? Because I feel like that's probably the secret sauce to even having everybody agree and have kind of consensus around the issue, and then really kind of get after the problem and understand that we all need to go to the gym, to use your analogy earlier. What do you think about that?
Yeah, psychological safety is huge. One of the things that I always say is you almost have to assume everybody or all the women in the room have had some level of trauma. And even though it might not be precisely definition of trauma, it was significant to that person. And what I mean by that is you could have the woman shut down, crying, not wanting to talk. And that's before you even start a conversation. That's where they're coming from. So psychological safety is huge, I think. And that's the reason why I love women's circles, that we create an environment where we try to be as judgmental, free of judgment as possible, which I know is, it's not really entirely possible, but we try to just hold that space so that amongst women, they can at least speak. And then the stronger people in that group can be the voice. So it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to that specific person. It could just be in general issue. But the other piece is, when it comes to psychological safety, is say they don't have a group, right? It's just the 3 women. I mean, for the Coast Guard, there's so many units where there's either 1 or 2 women at the unit, and that's it. So how do they navigate that? And that's where I think that it's so important to have mentors and sponsors, those sponsors in a meeting to say, hey, what do you think about this? And that goes for any minority too, whether it's a woman or a minority, is having that person at the table to help them and encourage them, or just allow their voice to be heard is pretty huge. But I think it's important, and it's something that has to be navigated very carefully within, whenever you do this type of work. I mentioned before that or I was actually talking to Erick, I guess, about that, is my master's is in holistic counseling. So I do have that background in where I had a private practice for a couple of years working with with people with some significant mental health issues. So I'm trying to be very, very mindful of what everybody brings to that table whenever we meet with organizations. And the other thing I want to say is, like, whenever we're talking about these issues, oftentimes the issues that are being raised are not specific to women. They're specific to climate and regardless of gender.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really cool too, to see that even though it's the woman that brought up the issue, the whole organization benefits, which is another reason why it's really important to have men and women at the table for all these discussions. And then I think you said something about naysayers. And what I would say about naysayers are those people that aren't on board. I think it's important to hold them accountable. That also contributes to psychological safety. So if we're saying that's not okay, or we're firing people, I mean, whatever disciplinary action needs to be taken against those people, that makes those people, the women or whoever else is the victims, feel more safe because they know that the organization is going to support them. So I think that's really important. And I think that's oftentimes where people fail or organizations fail, is they do not hold people accountable. And those people are often the ones that have been there forever. They're not willing to change. But you gotta get rid of the dead weight, so to speak.
No, it's very tough, I would say, as a leader, as a person that has the authority, the formal authority. We've talked about that on the show, that when the rubber meets the road, you've got to make that hard decision for the betterment of the organization. It's not because of your own personal belief system. And I wouldn't say that you're the detractor as well, but I mean, it comes on you at the end of the day. And to me, if the organization's not willing to make those said decisions and actions that are bold and hard and challenging, yet better for everybody, then the organization doesn't deserve to be an organization. And I think you've seen that as well, when they get away from those core values and really the norms of everybody's thoughts. And you got the subset of the folks that are with the formal authorities that just aren't listening, and they're in their own shell for whatever reason, and people leave. They'll vote with their feet all day long too. So I think we all need to be very real about that. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because the accountability is probably the other most important thing in all of this conversation, for sure.
Yeah, and that was one of the pieces of clarity that I got during my time of a pause, so to speak. I will not work with an organization that's not ready to implement change. It's not worth it to me. I'm not going to convince you. That's not what I'm here to do. That's not what my purpose is. So if you're ready and you are willing to do the work, let's do this. But if not, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's okay too, because there's like maturity levels of all of this. And, one day they'll figure out that they have a problem and they need to go work on it, and they'll hopefully reach out back to you. And if not, that's okay too. And there's others to go help.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's all different levels. And coming in whenever you meet with an organization, finding out where they are baseline, because you're going to have within that organization people at all different levels. And it's really important to get everybody on some sort of level playing field and then build up from there. It's a really good point. Yeah.
No, so I think that especially what I've noticed with the consulting piece, and that's our time that we're gifting to someone, even if it's they're paying us for it, but we're gifting our time to them. And if you see there's no end in sight, or they're not ready, because it could come off as disingenuous, is like, look, hey, we've got a consultant on board. We're focused on leadership. We're focused on gender equality. We're focused on these things. Just because you hired someone doesn't mean that you're focused on it. Just means it could be just a show. Right, that hey, we put some money against these programs that we don't really believe in, but it exists. So that's just one of the things. So I see these diversity organizations popping up all over the place, because I just looking at LinkedIn, right? I see a lot of folks with the title now of director of diversity and inclusion, right? And then you look at like kind of I like to look at that just to see where have they been, what have they done, and this is like their first role. There's just director, and then peek over to the organization site, and it's, you know, it'll say it there, this new organization with a new director for diversity and inclusion, where it's like, okay, well, it hasn't been really your focus, right? Or there might be some bad press out there that says that they need this. So yeah, it can come off as disingenuous, and, you know, I applaud you for you know, standing your ground and drawing the line in the sand and say, you're not going to get, you know, I'm not going to waste my time if you're, you know, just doing this for show and or because it's a fad and it's out there in the news, and you feel like we have to do it because of cancel culture or whatever the case may be. So no, continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things that you can really understand how the organization, how seriously they're taking it, is look at where that position is in the organization.
Right.
Is it embedded within
in the basement?
HR? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what I always ask, is where is this within the organization? And that tells you a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all virtual at a satellite office. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
or is there an opportunity to move it? You know, is there any appetite to, or is there any freedom to move this to a different part of the organization? If the answer is, we haven't thought of that, I'm like, okay, maybe we could, there's a possibility here. So.
Hey, Patti, just to put you on the spot as we come up on close here is, you know, for those folks that are out there listening, no matter where they're at in their career, what, you know, a couple nuggets you want to leave with them that they need to be thinking about?
Probably do their own soul searching. So one of the things that I did during my time, and this was that course I was telling you about with the business coach and life coach, and I'll give a shout out to them. It's Jamie Peer and Jill Glassennap, and they're both women veterans and entrepreneurs, and they're the ones that led this course. And they led us through an exercise that we revisited every week for 12 weeks. And that exercise is, what do you want? What's your dream in your career, your relationships, your time and money freedom, and your health and wellness? And so every week we had to write that out. And when we wrote it, not only did we write, you know, I want a consulting business or whatever, but I had to put details in there. And the details are the 5 senses of what it smells like, tastes like, looks like. Here's, you know, all of the senses. And it was kind of cool because one of the things that came out of it was I really wanted a leather bag, because for me, this leather bag represented like a professional woman consultants. And like I had this very big image of this leather bag, and also with leather comes a smell of leather. And anyway, so once I got my leather bag, like I finally found this leather bag, I was like, I've arrived at my consultancy, you know. But my point is not about the bag. My point is, like, I think it's important to do that exercise. Do you want to travel? Do you want the time and money freedom to travel? Do you want, for me, part of my day, I have to work out every day. And that's in the form of walking outside. So that was very big for me. And my next thing was, I have to be able to walk because it's so important for my mental health. So that would be my piece of advice. As leaders, I think you really need to know who you are and what you want in life. And when you get clarity on that, it's amazing how things sort of just happen. You don't have to force it. You don't have to, like, people come into your life at the right time, conversations happen at the right time, business comes at the right time. It just, you're living in flow. So that would probably be my biggest piece of advice, is just do that exercise and do it regularly.
Right. All right. Hey, so here we are on close. Patti, thank you for coming on again. And, you know, hopefully you're a regular. We don't have to wait 2 years to get you back on. Yeah, no, it's always insightful. It's always great to have you on here and sharing, you know, some things that we need to do to push the ball forward here in society. So if you're a first time listener, thank you for joining us today. If you know you're a regular, welcome back. Steve, I'll leave you with the final word or thought.
Yeah. So Patty, again, thank you. It's been great to have you on. You've challenged a lot of my beliefs and thoughts. So I've grown listening to you and your purpose and why. I think my big two things are, taking pause. I think that's something that everybody can take away from this session with you today, that it's important, and you need to know that threshold or tripwire for yourself of, we need to shut this down for however long it needs to be for yourself, and get back to your purpose and your why. And then I think separately, and this is really to the listeners, you have a voice, and we've said it many, many times, and I'm going to just foot stomp it again, that, speak your heart and your mind and your organization, your family unit, your community, whatever those folks and people that are around you that you might feel oppressed, or, that your thoughts aren't being heard, and you've got that solution or idea or concept or even problem that needs to be thrown out there. Don't ever feel like you're not important enough, and you need to hopefully be bold and put it out there, and be vulnerable, be that first follower, and that lone nut sometimes. So with that, I appreciate the time, and hopefully you'll have a great rest of your weekend.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.